Good afternoon. My name is Richard Foster. I'm a resident of Longmeadow, Massachusetts. I'm also a previous select board member and a member of your capital planning committee. I'm also a proud owner of a solar voltaic system on my own home in Longmeadow. I've got represented today by the gentleman by the name of Peter Dion. He's a solar energy consultant. I've known Peter for 3 or 4 years. He helped design the system that is on my home today. And I have long since thought about solar systems and the communication I see on the internet and on social media. There's a tremendous amount of confusion. I sense there's a lot of people that have actually been somewhat sold something that they didn't need or sold something that didn't meet their expectations. So I got with Peter and I asked him if we could do a forum and talk about all the highlights of how to put a solar voltaic system on your home, the procurement process, the interviewing process, kind of what we're going to call Solar 101. And so our entire session today is going to be an open forum between Peter and myself, where we're going to talk about several of the things which both of us feel are very important to you if you're talking about putting a solar system on your house and how you go about it. So it's my pleasure to go ahead and introduce Mr. Peter Dion. Peter, I'll let you introduce yourself if you like.
Okay. My name is Peter Dion. I've been a solar consultant, designer for about a dozen years now, over a decade. I've worked for 5 different companies, 2 of which, one was one of the largest in the country and the other was one of the largest, if not the largest, in Connecticut. I've done both residential and commercial systems, and I've been in the industry long enough to see everything that was happening a decade ago and where it's changed to now. So thank you, Richard, for inviting me. I'm glad to have a conversation about it.
Great. Well, we're glad to have you with Peter also. By the way, on a personal note, when I put my solar system on, I interviewed 5 firms, and Peter was one of the 5 firms. And at the end of the session that I had with all the occupants, I can tell you, Peter was the only individual that could answer every single question that I presented to him about the ins and outs of solar application. And I do ask a lot of questions. So I do consider him to be a technical expert, a very fair and honest person in what he presents and when he talks to a client. So I say the purpose of the forum is to educate anyone listening on some of the pitfalls and some of the benefits and the whole package of solar voltaic systems. And I guess, Peter, where we get down to the point is where do we start in this process? I mean, we have the internet, we have people knocking on our doors, and from your perspective, where is a good starting spot?
So that's a tough place to be right now. The industry has changed in such a way that your first touch is probably going to come towards you before you actually do any investigation. So it may be through a knock on the door and somebody cold calling you and asking you if you have interest and trying to promote some kind of meeting, or at one of the big box stores, you'll see a lot of the big companies there they'll have a little tiny booth and they're trying to get you to sign up. So just be aware that the people that are knocking on doors or are working at those areas, those businesses trying to get your information, they're not solar designers or consultants. They don't really know solar. Their main mission is to get your phone number, your address, and set up some kind of appointment. They're not going to be able to tell you if your house is good for solar. They don't know that stuff. But they are trained to say the right thing, to entice you to make an appointment. Not necessarily saying that the appointment is going to be a bad one with a bad company, but just understand that that person, they don't know that much about solar. They're trained to get appointments, and that's their mission. So that's your first touch, typically. Mm-hmm. And that extends to the internet now. That's the new change. Now you go on the internet because you say, well, I'm going to find out more on my own. There's many internet sites that are there to trap you to enter a lot of your information. At the very end, then all they're going to say is, we need your phone number and your email.
Right.
And again, it's the same purpose, to set up an appointment. The internet sites almost guarantee that you're going to get a lot of phone calls. They will typically sell your information to many different solar companies. So just be prepared. If we all like to do internet search for whatever we're interested in purchasing at that time, but it could lead to a lot of phone calls you weren't anticipating to get.
So basically, they're harvesting information at that
Exactly.
point.
Yep.
And it might go to a variety of different databases, and you may be getting calls from all over the country on this.
Exactly. On the internet, it's typically not the actual installer that's trying to get your information to follow up with you. It's a company trying to get your information to sell it to many different companies.
Okay,
And
so they don't really have your personal interest in mind.
not at all.
I mean, generally speaking, they don't.
They know that solar companies will pay for that information, and they're going to sell it to as many as they can.
Okay. Well, Peter, what about door-to-door salesmen? I mean, we've all had somebody come up and
Yep.
knock on our door. What's the lowdown on door-to-door salesmen on solar systems?
So there's just a few companies doing that, but they're doing it very effectively. They are choosing neighborhoods and might put 3-4 people and just literally walk door to door. And the salesperson knocking on your door is trained to say the right things, say the things that they think will get an appointment. Only the consultant actually visits with you at the kitchen table and actually looks at your actual situation, your roof condition, your visibility to the sun without shade, will actually be able to tell you if your house is good for solar. Sometimes they may negate the appointment once they check that you actually don't have a great roof. But the person knocking on the door, they don't know that.
Okay, so basically the person knocking on your door is sort of like the internet. They're harvesting information.
But usually just for one company.
Right.
Yeah. And typically those are the companies that you probably don't want to spend that much time with. They're limited to mostly leasing companies tend to do that. So.
Okay, we'll get into leasing a little bit
Yep.
farther down in. I know there's some horror stories on leasing systems versus ownership of systems. But I guess basically the point we wanted to get across is if you've got somebody knocking on your door selling you a solar system, that person is not a solar expert.
Not at all.
That is a salesperson.
Yep.
And they're trying to harvest information to get another salesperson to come give you the actual information. So I've heard the claim, they come up and say, well, we'll get you a free system, no money down.
Oh, that's the famous opener. It's free.
Right.
And there are incentives for homeowners from both federal government and the state. And if it's a lease system, all those incentives don't go to the homeowner. You know.
Right, and we'll cover that again
Yep.
a little bit further on. So now we've pretty well identified, if you're looking for a solar system, there's a variety of different places where you can get input on possible firms. You can also talk to your neighbors that have a solar system.
I think that's the best one of all.
Okay.
Find a neighbor who's got a solar system and just knock on the door and say, I see you have a solar system. Did you buy it? Did you lease it? Did you like who installed it? What are your savings? Are you
Right.
saving money? And probably the more recent installs will have the more up-to-date information.
Right, and the most up-to-date equipment too, I would imagine.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's say that we've got that reference. Now, how do I go about selecting a firm? What should I be looking for when I'm starting to interview firms or going down the internet and finding firms to come do business or come give me a proposal? What should I look for?
You want to ask them which products they're, if they can start to name brands of solar panels as an example, at least that's a good sign. If they're saying things like they're all the same, that's not a good sign. So the fact that they will list on their website some brand names is a good sign. You want to know where their corporate headquarters is. If it's in Texas or California, how well can they service a Massachusetts or Connecticut customer, right? And of course, if you're seriously thinking of meeting with them, tell them to come prepared with references. And any good company should be able to provide references of customers that have solar panels already.
Yeah, and I would imagine references like, for instance, here, Longmeadow references in our community.
As much as possible,
Yeah.
local, yeah.
As much as possible local.
And even though you may not visit a reference, ask them, would you mind if I visited with you for 10 minutes on Saturday morning? And if they do, then that's fantastic. But even if they don't, the fact that they say yes means they legitimately have the solar system. Sadly, there's a very small portion where people are called singers, where they sing praise to the company, but they don't actually have a solar system.
Oh, why?
Yeah. But I think that's kind of rare now.
Yeah.
But it can happen.
They're called singers.
Singers.
Okay. That's a new term. I've never heard that one before.
They sing the praise.
So how about the reputation of the firm? How many years they've been in business? Should I be concerned about that?
Less so. Even the companies that I worked for, every single one has changed. The manufacturer length of business is probably more important than the installer. My company is a young company and we're doing an incredible job. The two oldest companies in Connecticut are not doing as well, as an example. So the age of the company is not necessarily a guarantee of a great performance. I would say the references are the best. You could look at Google reviews. It doesn't hurt. I would trust Google reviews probably more than any other. They seem to be more accurate, as an example, but it shouldn't be your last resort.
Well, now, you touched on an interesting point. You said not so much how many years they've been in service, but the equipment that they're delivering to the home. So you're talking about the higher end panels, or I would imagine that's what you're referring to.
I am. In North America, we use a lot of electricity in our homes compared to poorer countries. It's just a common sense. So we need very, very efficient panels. The more efficient the panels, the more expensive the panel, but the more quality it is. So North America and probably a few other countries like Japan probably have the most efficient panels in the world. But most of the rest of the world have panels that are much less efficient, still functional, still solar panels that make kilowatt hours of power. But they don't need, in the poorer countries, to have the efficiency of the panels that we have. So that limits the amount, the number of companies that have the high performance panels that we really need in North America.
Right, and I guess the panels are being worked on as we speak. There are new developments coming in every year on the materials, I would imagine. But it doesn't seem like it's moving as fast as I would like to see it. Do you have any idea from your standpoint on how developments you're seeing take place? How rapidly are we moving forward?
If we go back like 20 years ago, we saw a lot of change up to about 10 years ago. And then in the last 10 years, there's been very little change other than maybe the physical size of the panels. They've gotten bigger. If I look at a panel from 7 years ago, from a customer I sold a panel 7 years ago, it's a 345 watt panel. It's actually still the most efficient per square inch in the world even today, 7 years later.
Wow.
So there's not a lot of change from that side of it. I think what's happening is for solar panel type change, we're probably going to see more uses for solar panels in things that you wouldn't think of, like assists to a skylight opening and closing with just solar power. But in terms of efficient panels, we're there now. And they might increment a tiny little bit per square inch in even the next 10 years, but I don't hear or see anything on the drawing board that's dramatically going to change what we have on the table today.
Okay, so if I'm reading you right from what you said, there's several different manufacturers of panels.
Yes.
But within there's several different price breaks. And behind that, there's several different levels of quality and performance and efficiency. So I bet it comes down to the old game, you get what you pay for?
You do get what you pay for. And in the highest quality, most efficient panels, there's very few players now.
Okay.
It's come down to maybe 2 or 3.
Who is one of the top? I'm not so much that you're endorsing that panel, but based on what you're seeing technology-wise, who's some of the leaders out there right now?
If anybody looks into the panels, the different manufacturers, SunPower's name will often come up, and they are kind of rated #1. They're the only solar panel company that's been around longer than the existence of the quote-unquote 25-year warranties.
Okay.
They've been in business for over 36 years.
Wow.
So they have a history, and they are the most efficient panel. So LG had a great panel. It was very efficient. Unfortunately, LG decided to, one of the few companies that was very successful, decided to get out of the solar panel business. Panasonic makes a very, very efficient panel. I don't think that the ones that we really want are available in North America, as an example.
Okay, and folks, you have to realize there's a lot more to this discussion than Peter and I are able to go into right now on the panels. There's degradation factors, there's warranties, there's efficiencies. These are the things that off to the side, you should educate yourself on as much as you possibly can, so when you talk to a salesperson and you start to price in the different panels, that you're aware of what you're getting into. It's not sometimes you're just spending more money. You're actually getting a far superior panel that's going to give you far superior service and longevity than other panels. Are all homes ideal for solar application?
I wish that was the case. It's not. And I would say Massachusetts and Connecticut very similar. We do have a lot of trees, so we have shade. If you have east-west, a south roof facing south with no shade is a perfect roof for solar. Not everybody has that. I have a customer 5 minutes from here who does, and that system produced massive power. And it's a perfect south, literally perfect 180 degrees dead south. But as you start to move that panel a little east or a little west, the same panel system starts to produce less and less, because now the sun is not hitting it every hour of the day of daylight. And of course, a north roof should never have solar panels. They're totally very, very low efficient place to put it. If ever you see panels on a north roof, there's probably only one company that ever did that, and they didn't do it to help the customer. It didn't help the customer at all.
Right. So remember that, folks. You've got a north-facing roof.
If that's your only roof.
And somebody, if it's your only roof, and they tell you they're going to give you 110% of your power, I personally would recommend you get another salesperson, because they're not evaluating something properly. They're trying to sell you a system that you don't need.
Not everybody can do solar.
Right. Now, I understand, though, when you evaluate a home,
Yep.
you're actually coming up with a laptop and a computer, and you're going out and actually sizing the backyard or sitting in the backyard and looking at the horizon, and there's a mapping system that shows the solar potential. So it's not coming off the top of your head. This is actually science that's backing up your evaluation. Is that correct?
Correct. We used to do it by actually climbing on the roof with a $3,000 device that we would point dead south and trap kind of the incoming daylight, and it would see any shade from trees, neighbors' houses, or even your own roof. If you have a second roof a little higher, it would shade a possible roof. We used to do it all manually. Now, with satellites, we're able to use 3 different satellite systems on one home and get 4,000 points of shade, track all that.
Right.
Now, the downside of that is, if that satellite view is 6 months old, a year old, 2 years old, it may not be up to date. So the question should be asked, are the trees that are there and everything that would shade your back roof or your front roof, whatever roof you're planning, are they pretty much the same that they've been over the last 2 years? Yes, right. Then that satellite estimation of production will be very accurate. I didn't believe in it. So the first year I climbed in every roof, and I did it the manual way, which is dead accurate. And it would compare to the satellite, and guess what? It was dead right every time.
Yeah, the satellites are doing a wonderful job, aren't they, in a lot of things?
They didn't do it first, but they've tweaked it, they figured it out, and now with 3 different satellite technologies, and with so many points of shade and views, they got it.
Yeah, I did have a thing here that says, how many panels should I have? And that question will be answered a little bit later, but I said, the other question was, if I'm interviewing firms, reasonably, how many firms should I interview?
If you unfortunately touch the internet the wrong way, you'll get to talk to many firms.
Yeah.
So, but if you're going to actually find 3 good firms, that would be the best. But use your gut. You know, I would say at least 2. At least 2. Because if you only have a great meeting with that one company, you may not know what they haven't talked about, haven't put on the table. And you may think you had a great meeting until you have the second one and realize, oh, I had a better meeting.
Right.
And the chances of having 2 great meetings, you're in great shape. Now just choose the one you like.
That was not my experience.
Well, that's what I said, the chance of having 2 great meetings.
It was not my experience. I did have some meetings, but they weren't all the same. But good point. And I think I did have 5, and I think that was likely too many.
Probably too
many. But
many.
I think Peter just brought up a good point. If I'd had 3 or so that I considered the 3 that I was going to use, I likely would have made a mistake, because I think in the interviewing process, mine was later on down when I finally found the firm that I wanted to deal with. So you have a lot of different options on solar. It's not just light and white and black. There's a lot of different options. There's leasing, there's purchasing, there's something called PPAs.
Yep.
And can you start to touch bases on what they are, what people could expect, and what are possibly, it's going to be a long topic, what's the pitfalls and the pros and the negatives on these different systems?
So let's start with the lease. The lease. The lease is actually a good option if you really if you don't pay really federal taxes in your income. If you're retired, fixed income, very low tax appetite, then the lease might be the only way for you to get solar and still see some savings. But if you are paying a decent amount of federal tax every year, then you definitely want to look at something else, at a purchase. So that's the way that most people should look at it. It's the first thing I show a customer. I have the ability to put a lease on the table. I haven't put one on the table for a customer in probably 3 or 4 years now.
Right.
Because the numbers just work best. Because you have federal tax credit, you have state incentives, and that's all money coming back to you to help reduce the costs of the system. If you lease, all those savings are on the table, not for you. They're for the leasing company, and now they're giving you a share of the savings. And their goal is, what's the minimum amount of savings I can give my lease customer that they'll let me put panels on their roof so I can make the most profit on that roof.
Right.
Yeah.
I have to be biased. I personally am biased against leases because I'm not a leasing type customer, and I have to kind of couch that bias a little bit. But you're right. I think the people need to remember one thing that Peter said, or a couple, 3 things. The one and most important thing is all the incentives that you would have if you purchase your own system, if you lease, do not go to you.
They don't.
They go to the installer of that system. That's the federal tax credit, that's your state tax credits. It all goes to them. And you get zero. You get a system, you may be paying different things, but the main thing is you don't get any of the tax incentive. And in the system I put on, I think I got like $12,000 tax credit.
Yep.
And it was a major contributor towards purchasing the system and having ownership of it. Now, that's the lease. Are there many types of leases, or is there just generally one type of lease? So
mostly the lease now has an increment. It goes up every year by 3%, 2.99%.
What goes up, Peter?
The lease payment.
Okay.
So if they can save you $30 a month and the utility rate goes up, and now you'd be saving $40, they actually want to take that $10 off your table and put it in their pocket. So they're going to increase every year 3%, 3%, 3%, so that as the utility increases its rates, you're still only saving your $30 a month. That's the lease, the game of the lease. If you purchase it, let's say you're saving $50 a month on your purchase, and then the utility raises prices, now you're saving $70, you're saving $80. That's your savings stays in your pocket. Your lease price goes up every year, and your purchase price is fixed for whatever the term of your loan is.
So in other words, it's sort of like with the tax incentives. In other words, the person leasing you the system gets all of the advantages, if there's any advantages that come along. They may share a fraction with you, but not near what you'd have if you had total ownership. Now, I've heard horror stories on leases when you resell a home.
It's a big problem. If you're selling your home and you have a lease system, most people who do a lease don't look into all the numbers behind it. Have you pre-negotiated a purchase price if at some point in the lease you want or need to buy the system? And if you look at that, you're going to see that it's probably more than you would have wanted to buy that for. And these are I won't say no-name panels for leasing, but they're typically not the best panels.
Right.
So now you'd be forced to buy at a price you didn't pre-negotiate a panel that you probably wouldn't have bought in the first place.
So again, everything is in the favor of the firm holding the lease.
It is. So remember now, the buyer of the home looks at your lease, and maybe for them, because they know that had it been a purchase, there'd be bigger savings on the table. Right. They're not interested in stepping into your shoes and they want your home, but they don't want that lease. Now the seller has to decide, okay, I'm not going to sell my house to that person because they don't want to step into my shoes, and maybe this happens several times. This could be an issue. Or in order to sell my house, I have to work with the lease company and buy the panels that I never intended to buy.
Right.
So it's a complication.
Yeah.
Everything else about your house, when you sell it, it's yours.
Right.
But the solar panels are leased and they belong to somebody else, and they're making power and they're creating some savings for you. But when you go to sell your house, they're going to say, well, just talk your buyer into stepping into your shoes.
Right. Now, a lease system also
Yep.
doesn't build equity in your home, is that correct?
It doesn't, because it doesn't come with the home. It's a separate outside.
It's a lease system. It
It belongs
disappears.
to somebody else. And it's not disappearing. That's the problem.
Right. But I mean, I guess after, what, 15 years when the lease runs out? What happens when the lease runs out?
So the leases are 20 years.
Okay.
If you don't say anything, I think it automatically will put you back 5 more years. So then it'll be 25. I think there's an option often there's an option to buy at 20 years.
Okay.
But if you're not on top of it and you don't turn the starter on start the vehicle on that process at the right moment, then you're stuck for 5 more years. Now, don't hold me to that, because I think every lease could be different.
Right.
But they are 20-year leases, and the panels can last longer than that. You know, even a mediocre panel is probably still 30 years, 35 years at the very least, I would think.
Right. Okay, so we hit the lease thing. It's
Yep.
I guess the best summation that we could put is not so much buyer beware, but be a very, very, very informed person if you're going into a lease. Even if it goes to the point of talking to a real estate agent that maybe specializes in selling homes with leases, and find out all the ins and outs, because there are a lot of things in there that could surprise you down the road, 5, 6, 7, 8 years down the road, especially if you go to sell your home.
I think if you talk to a realtor who's sold homes with leases, they're going to, prior to getting a leased solar system, they would talk you out of it, I would think. Yeah, because they don't want the problem of selling that house with the lease system. It's not going to be an easy sale.
Right, it's not going to be an easy sell.
Yeah.
Then you also have outright purchase.
Outright purchase is still the best way, because that's how the federal tax incentive, which is it's 30% now, and the state incentives are also quite good. All those incentives are geared to putting money back in the homeowner's pocket to make the system the least expensive possible. It really favors the homeowner. And at some point, whether it's a loan or if you're doing a cash purchase, let's pretend it's a loan for a moment. At some point, that loan term, 15 years, 10 years, 20 years, whatever it is, once it's paid, then your electricity is free from that point on. That's huge savings.
Right.
And then if you're selling your house at that point, and you're thinking, okay, well, I've got the house next door, like similar to mine, has no solar. Mine has solar. I'm saving X amount of thousands of dollars a year in electric costs. My house is worth a lot more than that house. Similar house, similar living style, except one has, a $2,000-3,000 less of an owner expense of operation.
Right, but no equity build if you have a lease system.
No equity build.
Only if you have total ownership.
If you own that system, there's definitely equity, because it's an additional system on the house that's owned by the homeowner, that's cutting costs of electricity.
Now, I believe there was, if not still are, some incentives for financing too, some low interest rates on solar applications?
So I'll be super clear on that. Yes, you're going to hear low interest rates. The going interest rate without any of these solar incentives is probably in the 10% range. It used to be 7, I think it keeps climbing. So when you get an interest rate, right now I think the better ones are going to be around 4%. It's like a mortgage where you're buying down the rate. So you can get a lower payment, and if you're going to be in the loan for the full term, it's a smart way to do it. You buy down the interest rate of your solar loan to 4% instead of 10 or 7 or whatever it would normally be. So you pay an amount up front on the loan costs, and then that lowers the payment over 20 years. Any good consultant should be able to show you all the different loan options, all the different pricings, all the different plans for 15, 10 years, 20 years, whatever it is. Right now, 20 years is the most popular.
Okay.
Used to be 15, now it's 20.
Right. Now, I know there's not an exact answer for this, but generally speaking, how many years will it take to pay off an ownership system?
If it's a cash purchase and there's no loan interest involved, it's just straight, we're probably looking at 6 to 10 years, maybe 12. It depends on, of course, the quality of the panel.
Right.
If you're getting the best panel, it'll be maybe a couple years more. And add a few more years if it's going through a loan, only because you're paying back the interest on that loan as well. So you're getting the equipment. A cash purchase is equipment only and install labor. A purchase through a loan, it's all of that plus the interest on the loan over a period of time.
And the system is good. Most of the warranties are what, 25 years now on a system?
I'm glad you brought that up, Richard. The warranties, everybody talks about 25-year warranties. All the solar panels have 25-year production warranties. But then most conversations kind of stop there. They don't tell you about the other 2 warranties you should be asking about. One is labor and one is hardware. A lot of times the hardware and the labor is only 10 years. One company at least has 25 years on the production like everybody else. But then they also have 25 years on hardware and they also have 25 years on labor. That's different. Commercial customers love that kind of warranty. They really want to have, you know, we're talking massive solar systems covering an entire manufacturer's roof or a school. It's helpful for them to know that everything's covered for 25 years.
Right.
And they will get into the weeds, get into those discussions and know ahead of time, oh, 25, 25, 25. I think a lot of times homeowners only hear the first one,
right,
and the other 2 are not brought up. So they think, oh, I have a 25-year warranty. You do, except the hardware is only 10. Oh,
Right.
I didn't know that. Well, that wasn't brought up.
Well, there was even one thing that I found when I was doing my research.
Yep.
Even the simple thing of replacing the panels, who pays the shipping?
So every homeowner will pay for shipping and technically for recycling the panel, except with SunPower. I'll say the name of the company. SunPower covers all that.
Right.
So they're the only ones that cover it.
Well, I wanted to mention that because that's why I chose SunPower panels.
Yeah.
Because of that one factor that took one more worry away from me of a potential worry that I had a good warranty and that they were going to ship. Because I'd read some articles on the internet of people that really got caught in a mess when they had a system go bad and they had to bring in stuff and ship it and everything else. So, a lot of charges they didn't realize they were going to be hit with.
Knock on wood, a solar panel doesn't break often.
Right.
But if you're unlucky enough that it does break and now it's on you to pay for shipping, the shipping is probably going to be less than the recycling fee. The recycling fee is kind of $400. So if you're stuck to pay, but all that said, gosh, in the 12 years that I've been in the business, it's very, very rare that a solar panel has had to be replaced.
Well, we're going to get into the maintenance on them too, because you're right, they never need maintenance. There's one other thing. You have something that's called a PPA.
Yep.
What is a PPA?
So it's a prepaid purchase agreement. It's kind of like a sophisticated lease. You're paying more of it up front, and you're locking in the monthly fees for the entire term of the lease. So it's kind of like I would say it's like a smart lease, except it still has a downside. You don't get the benefits. It's not your system, it's somebody else's system. So I've rarely seen where the PPA can beat a good solar purchase. And when it's happened, I think that the homeowner is just didn't get a chance to sit down and talk with somebody on purchase and actually compare really the both of them. That's what I think.
But with the PPA also, you don't get the tax incentives.
You don't get the tax incentives.
All the royalties and all that stuff they owe to someone else.
Yep.
Okay. And there's another thing that I forgot to mention. In the state of Massachusetts, we have a program called Smart Money.
Yep.
You briefly tell us what that is?
So the Smart Money program has changed now. I'm not even sure it's even called Smart anymore. But basically what it is they'll look at your system, and we do all the admin to get it done. But they'll be paying you a yearly amount back. It's the state incentive. So
Yeah, there's a contractual figure that I had on mine, and I have the agreement, and I get monthly checks from the state.
That's the way it was before. I don't think it's like that anymore.
Okay, right now, yeah, okay, then maybe I better not go into the old system then, but
It's
just
the
tell
old
the
system.
people there is an incentive
There is.
from the state of Massachusetts, and you will not get that incentive unless you own your panels.
And the incentives from the state are not as generous as from the federal, but they're still good, and you want them, and they lower the monthly costs, and that's all in your favor.
Right. Now, I understand now that even Eversource has talked about setting up an agreement where they can reach in and take power from your batteries at nighttime and use the power, and then you regenerate, and there's a cost sharing thing there. I don't understand all the wheels that are turning there, but I understood there's a program.
So there is a great program. There's a benefit to you, of course, when you have a battery system, is that the system can operate at night, or if the grid goes off, you have the batteries are supporting the solar, so now you're still okay. It's like having a permanent generator. But there's also a benefit to the utility companies. They pay a lot of money, more than the normal purchasing cost, on the hottest days, the high humidity days where everybody's using AC, high humidity, high heat. They need to get more power than they've contractually committed to getting. And so they go to third-party suppliers of power, and they pay a lot more than normal.
Right.
To the point where they realized if they could take some of that power from batteries that are sitting fully charged in people's homes that are not needed that day, that it would be of benefit to them. They could pay the homeowner a certain amount of money that would make it beneficial to the homeowner, and still save money compared to what they're paying for those 3 days a month or the 10 days in the whole summer that they needed that extra power. And it's become a generous program, and it'll offset the cost of the batteries probably by about a third.
By a third?
Yeah.
Wow, it is a generous program.
So if the numbers are still correct, it's $5,200 up front for the first year towards the cost of batteries, and then they'll pay you a yearly amount if they drain the battery 5 times a year. So it'd be 3 times in summer and 2 times in winter. If they drain the battery 5 times a year, they will pay you a yearly amount for 5 years, and then years 6 to 10, if you still like the program and stay involved with it, they will offer it again, but at half that price.
Okay.
So all those numbers do add up, and it makes, because battery systems are not inexpensive.
Right.
You know, they're the highest quality, they're really smart, and so they're not inexpensive. And having these programs, it's a smart way to reduce the cost of battery ownership.
Okay, we talked about people going off grid with the batteries.
Yep.
And I opted not to put batteries in at this particular point.
Yep.
I put an emergency generator in instead. Because I realized that if I went for an extended period of time and exhausted my batteries, then my system was down. Unless I had some way to power the sunlight was still there, but I had to have power for the inverters to work and everything to keep it coming back in. So at that point I opted the other way. But people, I guess, have to understand there are limitations to being off-grid unless they have some form of backup power that can do something in case the solar goes for an extended period of time of say, gloomy days or whatever.
So going off-grid now, when we have net metering, doesn't seem to make sense. Net metering is when you're making extra power during the day. Let's say you're not there, you're not at your house all day, it's a nice sunny day, all that extra power, that power you're making, you're not using it, or a lot of it's not being used. That power goes back on the grid and it's owed to you. So in fact, the grid is temporarily a free battery backup. And that they owe you that on a monthly basis and on a yearly basis. So you're kind of stacking up that power, and they keep giving it back to you. The solar panels pay for themselves because you're taking money you were going to give the utility and paying off the system.
That's a good point.
The battery doesn't do that.
Right.
It's a huge convenience because the solar system by itself will not power your house if the grid goes down.
Right.
There's a fear that if your system was still making power and that there's no power on the street, that your system could backfeed into the lines and electrocute hurt somebody who's trying to fix the lines. But if you have battery backup, even though the power is out on the street, the batteries are being charged from the solar, and so you have power in your house. And battery backup is a fantastic technology, but it doesn't pay for itself.
Right.
The incentives we talked about help reduce the cost.
Right.
But you're not offsetting, you're not replacing, you're not saving money with them. Solar, you're totally saving.
Right. It's an insurance policy.
It's a great insurance policy.
Right. It's an insurance policy.
And if you find yourself losing power often, it's actually makes sense to do it, because the cost of putting more oil or propane or whatever
Right.
fuel you're doing, natural gas, in a generator, that adds up quickly.
I understand what the sales approach out there is to try to tell people that, especially if I want to lease a system, I'm going to try to tell people there's a lot of maintenance associated, or I'm going to insinuate there's a lot of maintenance associated with a solar system.
Yep.
Give us the bottom line, would you please?
So initially, solar panels are made to go in the most remote, tough, I would say dangerous, but areas in the world where there was no power at all. They're generally very tough technology, and there's no moving parts to them. They are very reliable. So when a company says to you, there's a lot of maintenance, and if you lease the system, we'll take care of all of that. It's funny how once you've leased a system, you'll never see them. They never come and do any maintenance. There's no maintenance to be done. So yeah, that's completely wrong. Solar panels are extremely reliable these days.
Right, but you will hear people say that, though, that they kind of insinuate. I don't think it's a direct charge. There's an insinuation there's maintenance. But folks, the panels are warranted for 25 years. And with that type of warranty, you can imagine they must be pretty doggone dependable, or they wouldn't have that type of warranty on them.
Yeah, the two things they say is there's a lot of maintenance. Not true. There's basically no maintenance. And the other thing they'll say is they're all the same. And that's not true either. They're not all the same.
Very much not true.
No.
How about solar panels? Is it a good investment for seniors?
It is a fantastic investment for seniors, because often seniors have fixed income. And as we all should be noticing now, the cost of electric keeps climbing up, and that's eating into your expenditures. And there's some things that just will, property taxes will go up, electric costs going up. If you can stabilize that electric cost by getting solar that covers all your needs, then that cost is fixed, and it's never going up from that point on. That's a very smart move on that side of it.
Right, it just caps it.
It caps it.
Right.
You lock in a payment on a whatever the term of the loan is, 10, 15, 20 years, then that's the payment you're making for the next next 15 years.
Right, and I think a lot of times if they have a good representative and they sit down and look at their finances, you'll find, especially their power use, you'll find that they could actually take the money they're paying on existing utility bills now and use it just to pay off their solar system.
Well, that's it. Any good solar system should be doing that.
Right.
If the cost of the solar system per month is higher than what you're paying currently, you probably don't have a good house for solar. And
Right.
it's just not producing a decent amount of power.
Yeah, because it's a good point, because I purposely took mine up just a little bit more than normal because
Yep.
of the degradation of the panels.
Yep.
And I wanted the system to still supply at least 100% of my power. And it's doing it right now. I mean, I'm over 100% of my power almost every single month of the year.
And that's something that I was always proud to be able to do, is to come very close, if not a little over, what the customer needed. But I ask a lot of questions. I want to know what's going to change. If you're a family of 4 or 5 and you have kids that are going to college, your current electric bill, once the kids start moving out and going to college, is going to drop. So to try and make the solar system make 100 or 105% of something that's going to drop in 5 years, that would be the wrong design. So I ask questions. Are you planning to get an electric vehicle? Are you removing or adding things like hot tub, pool? I need to know all this so that I can correctly design the system.
Right.
And then once I design it, hopefully 5 years, 6 years from now, it's making exactly what you need.
Right. We had already asked this question. Is it harder to sell a home? No. Is it harder to sell a home with a solar system? And we touched on that before from the other angle, but nationally the stats seem to indicate that you'll sell a home 20% faster with a solar system.
Definitely.
And 17% more than, or 20% faster and 17% more than those without.
And I think that stat is exactly correct, and especially true in states like Massachusetts, Connecticut, where our cost of electric is high.
Yeah, because they were talking, the one stat that I just read was talking about an average home, you could increase the property value by about $60,000. That's what they were estimating.
I think in the states where we have high electric costs, that's probably likely.
And we just took a hit, didn't we?
A big one.
Yeah.
All of Massachusetts and Connecticut, we took big hits.
Right.
We are actually now paying for electric what I thought we'd pay for electric in 10 years.
Yeah.
I never thought I would see it climb to where it is now so quickly. It's very
So that also makes me happy that I opted to increase the size of my system a little bit to offset that.
That turns out to be a wise move.
Turned out to be a wise move, yes. Okay, the average home in America by the internet said there's about 10,400 kilowatt hours of electricity a year. Your normal panel sizes, how large are they now?
So they used to be 42 by 62, 40 by 66. Now what's happening in the industry, they're adding one more row of solar cells on the top and the bottom. So the panels are physically getting a little bit bigger. And it's actually, it provides some additional savings in manufacturing. So we're putting less panels on the house, still getting the same big production.
Okay. I think what was after too, the panels, what, about 350 watts? Is that seem to be a design factor we've hit?
It was before.
Okay.
And now we seem to be, by adding those extra rows of cells, we're in the 400s now.
In the 400s now, okay.
Yeah. But it's funny, that 345, 365 is per square inch. They're still the most efficient per square inch. But the manufacturers are now moving to the bigger panels, still having a high efficiency. They're within like a 0.2%, like not even like a fifth of 1%. Very, very close.
Right. I guess the point I was trying to get to, or I was coming around the wagon to, you're not going to have just two panels on your roof to supply all your power for your home. No. Each panel is producing 300 or 400 watts, whatever. So you're going to have somewhere in the vicinity 28 to 34 panels for a normal home with 10,000 kilowatt hours a year usage.
So if we use your numbers, 10,400 kilowatt hours average, and I think that's a little high, but let's pretend that's right on the nose, and that's a house that I'd be looking at. If the house is dead south, we could probably cover that bill with 7,000 watts of solar. But as we start to move the house from south to west or to east, we're going to need more panels to get the same amount of power.
So 7,000 watts divided by the 400 watts, and that'd tell you how many panels.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. So anyway, you're going to have a fairly decent array up there if you're going to do a full home system, though.
I like to see, when I'm designing, I like to see the number of watts for the panels, call it like 10,000 watts, making more power. So a 10,000 watt system making 12,000 kilowatt hours, I love that. If I see 10,000 watt system making 9,000 kilowatt hours, I know that the roof is not the best. So there's some shade, and then I'm questioning. I'm saying, the tree that's creating the most shade, are you in love with that tree? Is there any way we can? Is it your tree? You know, because that's lost production, and it's just shade. You know, so I'm looking at that all the time. I look at system design very differently than the homeowner. I'm on the technical side of it, trying to make the most power, trying to get the best roof. Some of the newer homes have many roof surfaces, and I check every single one, what the percentage I'm getting from it, and I'm picking the most efficient ones.
Right.
It's kind of like a recipe.
Okay, I guess we're getting closer to the end here. I had a question that said, how do I determine which method of solar purchasing is best for me? That's kind of a real generic question, because we talked about the leases, we talked about the PPAs, we talked about the outright purchases. I think basically we've hit on a lot of those points, but that's what I wanted to leave the people with, is that if they're talking to a solar specialist like yourself, then they should be having a very similar discussion to what we've had. That there should be there should be some type of information that the customer gets on all the systems that are available and the pitfalls for them. Is that correct assumption?
It is, and once you have some real numbers on the table and you're looking at federal tax credit, what that amount is, the incentive coming from the state is going to come to you no matter what. But the federal tax credit is applied to whatever federal tax you actually pay. You do have 2 to 3 years to take it out.
Right.
So if you're not sure, look at that amount. Let's say it's a round number, $10,000. You call your accountant or you look on your TurboTax, and if you self-prepare your own taxes, and just see, what did I end up paying after all my deductions, and what did I end up paying in federal tax? And can I recoup that money back in 1 year, 2 years, or 3 years?
Right.
And if you can, you're in great shape.
Yeah.
If you can't, and it's really the opposite, you know, I've got $10,000 I can in federal tax, but I can only recoup $2,000, you might want to look at a PPA or some kind of lease and see if it's going to create savings. You won't save as much money per month on your electric, and you're most likely subject to increasing costs every month, but you're giving up one of the biggest incentives if you can't fully take advantage of it.
Right, right, that's true. I guess now there's some of the states have some pretty good websites that are run by the states.
They do.
Yeah, they're getting better. Connecticut also have some state-run websites?
Yep,
okay.
we do.
I just want to leave the people with that. Do some internet searching for your state-sponsored sites. There's a lot of
really
excellent information out there. They're going to give you a matrix, hopefully a matrix that you can download, that you can have an interview with a solar provider to make sure that you're asking not only the right questions, but you're getting the right answers for your decisions you're about to make.
I still think what we talked about at the very beginning, finding neighbors who have systems set up, is, and especially if they're purchase systems.
Okay.
How many companies did you meet? Why did you choose that company?
Right.
You know, how did the installation go? And ultimately, how much are you saving per month?
Right.
You know.
Well, when we originally set this forum up, we were going to have another individual here. It was a gentleman by the name of Rick Love. He was the owner of Synergy Smart Homes in Connecticut.
Correct.
He was going to come in and sit, and we had a scheduling conflict that happened today. So Peter was also scheduled to come in as a energy consultant. The purpose of our discussion today was not to sell you a system.
No.
Our purpose was to hopefully tickle your memory and educate you to the point where you're going to make the right decision when you've got people coming to your home to sell you your system, have the right answers, or at least to stop dead in your tracks and do more research. This is not the point of you don't impulse buy a solar system. This is something that you need to be methodically set down and looking at. It's not, you don't make a decision overnight. You don't make it when the salesman shows up and he says, I got 3 hours to close this deal. Show him the door, get rid of him, because that's not what you want. You want time to analyze, talk to your neighbors, go on a federal or go on a state website, talk to a person like Peter. Peter is a wonderful resource. Peter will talk to you on the phone. He doesn't have to sell you a system to share his information. Peter, we're getting ready to close down. Anything you can offer on a closeout?
As you were talking, it just made sense to me to say the following. Looking at the 3 different ways to have a solar system in your home, the purchase option, you'll get the most information, because if you're purchasing the system, they will talk about the panel, about microinverters, and things that we didn't talk about today. And if you're leasing, they're not going to want to talk about that, or same with PPA. So at least on purchase, you're going to get a lot more information. And that's a great starting point right there.
Well, that's a good point, because you're right. We did not get into the actual mechanics of the system, how it's attached to your roof and the inverters and the types of panels, on whether your panels keep producing, the grid keeps producing when one panel's got snow on it, or whether the whole system shuts down. Ladies and gentlemen, there's some systems out there, if one panel gets covered with snow, your entire solar system's down. My particular system, this panel can be down, this panel's at full speed. I can look at a grid, I've got an app that I can look at any time and see how my panels are producing. I can actually tell if there's something wrong with the panel and report it for service, and I haven't had to do anything. And I can also look during the day and see what the peak performance is. Now today, before I came in the meeting, I was producing about 9.98 kilowatt hours. I will produce more power today than I'm using at my home. There's no doubt in my mind. I'm banking power right now. And at this early time of the year, I'm already banking power.
March is the first month that you make more power than you use.
Right. And I cheated because I did in February.
Oh, you started
Yes,
seeing those numbers in
Yeah,
February?
I did. I actually produced more in February than I used.
Okay.
Of course, the wife got a little chilly around the house, but we still produced. Okay, well, Peter, do you have anything else you'd like to add?
No, I welcome any calls. I'm passionate about solar. I was in energy reduction technology in terms of building envelopes, and now I'm in production, and it's a goal. I will look at any house in terms of reducing your power before we do anything with solar to see if there's any waste we can take care of before, and then get you the best solar system possible.
Okay, well, Peter, I'd like to thank you for coming up. And ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to thank you for taking the time to watch this. I hope we have achieved what we set out to achieve. It was an information exchange, pique your energy, pique your interest more, and when you're looking at a solar application, and to do your research. That's the main thing. Do your research, talk to the experts, and just don't be caught with the first person who knocks on your door, because that's not the good way to go on a solar application. We're going to try to be viewing this from time to time. I'm going to post on social media to get some interest and let people watch it. And I say, I enjoy you tuning in and watching today. Thank you very much. Thank you, Peter, for coming in.
Thank you, Richard.
Okay.
Thank you.